Best. Can you hear me? Yes. Can you hear me in the back? Sounds good. All right, so let's start. As president of the Harvard Business School Club of Lebanon, as one of the co-founders of the Harvard University Alumni Association of Lebanon, with whom we're co-organizing this event, really pleased to welcome all of you here this evening. Thank you for having made it despite this horrific weather. I know many of you did not make it, but hopefully things will go fine. I'd like also to welcome all the attendees who registered online. I'm not sure how many they are. They were supposed to be 90, but they're not suffering from the weather. We're here to discuss this report that was issued by a group of professors from Harvard Kennedy School, the Growth Lab, about the recovery of Lebanon. But before I introduce the panelists and the agenda for this evening, I'd like to thank the BDD who is hosting this event and with whom we're collaborating for this event. First of all, let me tell you why we're here. We're here because we all love our country. We all see it bleeding. And we're obviously, all of us, looking for some recovery plan. Today, there's an IMF plan, and I salute their presence online with us right now. It had its criticism. There's also a government plan, though in some parts not complete. And now there is this report coming from the Growth Lab at Harvard Kennedy School. It's not sacred, but it has the merit to exist, and it will enable us to have this discussion today. You will see among our panelists that they don't have all the same views about this report, but definitely it's a third way. The speakers and explain the format. Let me just clarify a few things. This report obviously did not originate neither from the Harvard Business School Club of Lebanon, nor from the Harvard University Alumni Association of Lebanon. But we're here to present it to you as a start for a constructive discussion. This report did not originate from Harvard University either. It was commissioned to Harvard University. It was written by faculty and academics from the Kennedy School headed by Professor Ricardo Hosman. For the record, Professor Hosman is a strong experience in analyzing the economics of various countries. He's been a minister of planning in Venezuela before collaborating with various international agencies and finally becoming a professor at Harvard University. Let me tell you a bit our panelists, which, like I said, come from different backgrounds, different industries, and have probably a different approach about this report. I'll start with Dr. Habib Zarbi. Dr. Zarbi is an investment banker who used to work in Wall Street with JP Morgan, becoming later on professor at New York University. He's written many articles and books in the press and elsewhere. He's the honorary president of the Harvard
Harvard University Alumni Association of Lebanon, and Harvard Business School. And he holds an MBA from Harvard Business School. Dr. Riyad Habaji. Dr. Habaji is the chairman and general manager for BMO Bank. He's also the chairman for Unifert, BMO Securities, and others. He's the banker with extensive experience in various countries, being a banker in Belgium, in France, in Syria, in Lebanon, obviously. Dr. Habaji holds a maîtrise de gestion from Dauphine, as well as a PhD in economics from Université Lyon-Lumière. He attended the executive program called PMD at Harvard Business School. Finally, Mr. Nicolas Shikhani. Nicolas holds an executive program from Harvard Business School, from INSEAD. He's the president of the INSEAD Alumni Association, by the way. He's a seasoned banker with experience in, again, Singapore, Dubai, Paris, Lebanon, Geneva, you name it. He currently serves as a Knight from the Order of Malta, and he's a professor of finance at USG. Last but not least, let me introduce my colleague, Professor Najib Hashaheen, who is the president of the Harvard University Alumni Association of Lebanon, who's co-organizing this event. Professor Hashaheen is the main partner at Hashaheen Law Firm, which is specialized in arbitration, banking, and finance. He holds a PhD from Assas and an LLM from Harvard Law School. Finally, regarding the agenda for this evening, this welcome note will be followed by a brief summary of Professor Najib Hashaheen summarizing the report, its recommendations, and it will be followed by a discussion between our three panelists where they will be able to expose their own views, interpretations, recommendations about the report. I would appreciate if you do not interrupt the panelists during their presentation, but that you leave it afterwards for the Q&A session. So there will be a Q&A session after their intervention. There will be plenty of time to ask all your questions. And for those of you who are online, I would really appreciate if you can feel free to send your questions all along the presentation. I'll just be reading most of them at the end of this session. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jean-Marc, for this kind introduction. I'm very happy to be here tonight. Thank you to the Harvard Business School Club of Lebanon, which is the business school club of our illustrious alumni. It's the first event we organized together, and I think it's going to be the first of many. Before we start, I would like to highlight that this event is noteworthy for three reasons. First of all, this is a panel that is discussing a report. This report is a report on the sustainable recovery for Lebanon. It was prepared by a study center at the Harvard University, which is the Growth Lab at the Center for International Development at Harvard Kennedy School. Basically, what's going to happen is we're going to share with you the ideas that were stated in this report. We're going to discuss them, we're going to evaluate them, and then we're going to assess whether they are viable or not. Second point, this event is organized by the Harvard alumni in Lebanon, be it the Harvard University Alumni Association or the Harvard Business Club, which is very significant as it shows that the Harvard alumni still have ties to their university and are always looking at the activities that are being done at Harvard, and vice versa. It shows as well that Harvard is taking care of its alumni, it's looking at their issues, and most notably the Lebanese issue, which interests the Lebanese alumni across the world. Third and finally, and this is what makes this panel unique, this panel will discuss the ideas provided in this report. The panel will neither endorse or promote this report. The panel will not only discuss it, but the panel will neither criticize the report when it does not merit any criticism. So we're going to try to be as objective as possible. I think that's not going to be a problem. And I urge you to keep an open mind as well. These are ideas. Let's discuss them. And please do not ask your questions when the panelists are going to share their thoughts. You'll have plenty of time to ask your questions during the Q&A session. So on to the main issue. What is this report? What are the main ideas it contains? So this is a 69-page report. It's made up of 3 parts. First part describes the current situation and provides figures pertaining to the balance sheet of the state and of the central bank. I think most of you are familiar with the current situation, so no need to get into it. The second part of this report is discusses the causes of the collapse and cites several causes, mainly poor financial legacy of post-war reconstruction, lack of sustainable growth drivers, weaknesses in the fiscal balance, domestic funding of the deficit through domestic sources and mostly through dollar-denominated private sector deposits. Again, these are causes that more or less all of us know. But what don't we know about this report? Basically, it's the plan that is suggested by the Growth Lab at Harvard University. This report suggests a recovery plan that aims to address the insolvencies of the government, the central bank, and commercial banking system. The plan has 4 basic pillars. First, an alternative monetary and exchange regime. Second, a strategy to resolve all insolvencies, including the banking systems, the BDL, and the government. Third is a fiscal policy to create a capable government that is financially sustainable. And fourth, a growth strategy to get the economy moving. Practically speaking, the plan calls for the following measures. First measure is a capital control, which, according to the report, should be implemented immediately. This capital control will pave the way for the main strategy, which is a full dollarization of the economy to be implemented as soon as possible. Second part of the plan is to convert deposits made by the commercial banks in the central bank into claims on the government by exchanging them into interim restructuring certificates. Basically, what would happen is that the money deposited at the central bank will be converted into USD certificates, which are a liability to the government. As such, the central bank will be recapitalized and the government will inherit the debt of the central bank. Then these certificates will be given to the commercial banks in exchange for a reduction of their deposits at the central bank. In turn, the banks will exchange 90% of these certificates for bank deposits, which will be distributed to depositors. And the issuance of these certificates, according to the report, will decrease the debt of the central bank towards banks and the debt of commercial banks towards depositors. Now, the plan doesn't stop here because it calls for a recapitalization of the banks. And following these 4 steps, the government will have, according to the report, approximately $107 billion in debt. As such, the plan calls for a restructuring of the public debt, which requires a haircut of the public debt, which is primarily the Eurobonds and the newly issued certificates, and then the assistance of the IMF and other multilaterals. In addition, the plan calls for an increase of tax revenues by indexing income brackets to the inflation rate and raising taxes such as VATs. Finally, the plan calls for developing new sources of growth, such as agricultural value chains, tourism, and knowledge services. So in a nutshell, this is what the report suggests for the sustainable growth of Lebanon. Now, to help guide us through this report, we have the opportunity to hear from 3 experts, who I'm happy to say are all Harvard alumni. To my left, Dr. Habib Zoghbi is the honorary president of the Harvard alumni in Lebanon and the Harvard Business School Club. To his left, Dr. Riyad Ubaji, chairman of BMO Bank and alumni of the Harvard Business School. And finally, to his left, Mr. Nicolas Shifani, who's an expert in banking and finance and a Harvard Business School alumni. And he's wearing the Harvard tie, which shows that he's a real alumni.
Doing my best.
So my first thought goes to this restructuring of the public debt that is suggested in the report. And so my first question fittingly goes to the person sitting to my left, Habib. So the report suggests a restructuring of the public debt, and a bank restructuring is suggested. Now, the obvious question is this approach appropriate?
Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome everybody in the audience, including our 2 respected MPs, Mr. Fred Bustini and Mr. Waddah Saadi, and former Minister Marie-Claude Najm, and all of you friends and people who wanted to come with this silly weather to listen to us for some time. I want to thank you, Najib. I want to thank Jean-Marc for the introduction. And my peers also are going to help me go through this. The way I see this report personally, I see a serious effort on behalf of this department at Harvard, including professors from Harvard and from outside Harvard, to try to tackle the situation in Lebanon, which is a disaster, as you well know, for the last 4 years, with several plans and a lot of work and nothing happening yet, completely frozen. So they tried to come and say, listen, guys, the first thing you should do now is promote growth. Because if you don't have growth, you don't have taxes, you don't have money back in the banks, you have nothing. So after 4 years, you guys better focus on the growing economy and not waste your time on many other things. To do this growth thing, they're saying the first engine to all of this are banks. Because banks basically lend in the market, they create the multiplier effect. And if we have confidence, if we build confidence, which is very important for banks, then we increase the velocity also of money in the market. So you get a triple effect if you do that. So they're saying you're sitting there with banks doing nothing, basically, advertising on television, spending their money, sponsoring people, making all kinds of activities except lending and except basically putting the economy back to work. And of course, watching over their money abroad, earning 5% interest, when in Lebanon, nobody's earning any interest. So the question now becomes, okay, they want banks to work, so what do? They say the first thing, we're going to alleviate the pressure on banks. We're going to say to banks, look, we're going to remove $76 billion that you owe to people, and we're going to put it on the government side. And the positive thing about this is for the first time, in the Association of Banks or who were present during the last 10, 15 years in the decision making in association with the head of the central bank and with some other politicians. That's who I'm talking about. So I exclude people like Mr. Obaji, who has a very neat bank, one of the safest ones and better ones, well managed, and several other banks too. But I have to put the blame on the rest, of course. So they say, okay, now you have done this. We remove 76 billion from you, and we're going to give the people for this some bonds. Okay, they go through the central bank, back to the people, etc. Listen, we give the banks a gift of 10%, $7 billion. We give them certificates, and you guys, you get $70 billion. We remove it from you. And that way you will have a certificate. Once you have a certificate, your depositor is off your books. Your new balance sheet as a bank becomes $33.2 billion, when in reality, the balance sheet of banks before the crisis was $204 billion. Your balance sheet is 33 billion, and now we're asking you to capitalize based on the 33 billion. We forgot that before you had 20 billion, and your depositors counted on the 20 billion loss before they lose their own money. So the depositor, when he put his money in the bank, he knew there was a 20 billion cushion. The rest is the responsibility of the government, of everybody who spent the money. In this case, what they're saying is, okay, now your new capitalization should be 15% of the new balance sheet 33 billion, which is 4 billion only. And because you are in trouble, we're not going to ask you to put 4 billion. You will put only 1.4 billion, which is 5% capitalization. But since we want you to have 15% capitalization, we are going to lend you in subordinated notes from the central bank the difference. So you put 1/3, the central bank lends you 2/3. And after 2 years, you have to pay back these loans. If you don't pay back these loans after 2 years, that means that you becomes insolvent. Then we have to find a solution for you because you are insolvent. Little did they know that in Lebanon, 2 years becomes 20 years. And that if they give you 2 years to pay back a loan, which in fact is coming from whom? From the deposits, from the money in deposits, because there's no other place to get 1.3 billion or so loans. They have to take them from the deposits. So in this fashion, what they're saying to banks is, you stay what you are today. We take your capital as it is today. Don't increase any capital. Don't do any effort, but plan for the next 2-3 years to do a serious effort towards this. And in 2-3 years, we will see. But all of you banks will remain in the market. The weak ones, the bad ones, those that made crazy loans to politicians, bad loans to the market, who invested much more than they did in CDs in the central bank. And even those who invested in Eurobonds. I mean, Eurobonds is not the central bank. It was not an obligation to invest in Eurobonds. They invested in Eurobonds. And you guys who invested in treasury bills, also $40 billion. Well, okay, then this treasury bills, forget about all of it, okay? Now the question is, the real problem, what is it? The real problem now is the fact that if you consider that all the Lebanese treasury bills are out because you lost 99% of their value. No more loans in the government there. The Eurobonds are worth in the market today 6 billion. So it's almost nothing. And nobody is paying the depositors their money. So our economy today, what I want to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it's very easy to get growth. You don't need to do much. If you do what is the situation now and you don't pay back depositors, you can go on and grow. I assure you can grow. Because any economy where the private sector, the individuals don't have loans. The corporations don't have loans. The government is off 95% of its loans. The only problem remaining are the deposits. So if we don't get back a serious portion of the deposits, a fair portion, if banks don't go and sit and make a proposal for a fair deposit, not only talk about sort of boycotting any proposal that is there, if they make a serious effort, a fair effort, we will gain confidence, and then we can get a market where there is more confidence into the investments, and the rest can work on the basis of what the government needs to do to straighten this out. One more word only. I have to say that all this is not sufficient in the sense that it's not good to have only a haircut from the government. We need to have also a haircut from the deposits that are not worth what they are. Basically, people who got 25% during financial engineering, these people can't expect to be treated their capital and their money at the same as somebody who was there earning 2% on his money or 3%. You have to cut it. And this is $13 billion. This is not in the program. This has to be cut. Number two, the money that was transferred abroad, $8-9 billion. This, in my opinion, I can explain how you can bring it back. I have several ways, but I don't think it is proper thing, was not a proper thing to do. Has to come back in the market to the owners, the same guy who had his money. He has to bring it. This brings you $8 billion into the market, and then people start spending and it brings the market back. And several other steps have to be taken to reduce the liability before we go into this huge haircut. Thank you.
But Habib, the report suggests that the depositors and the deposit be replaced with restructured certificates that are to be ultimately paid by the state. Now, the main issue that we have is, can the state repay these certificates? And does the state have the capacity to meet its obligations? Dr. Riyad, I don't know if you can help us answer this question. What about the capacity of the state to meet these obligations?
First of all, I think that there is a common thinking that the state is insolvent. The state is not insolvent. The state is illiquid, but it is not insolvent, which is very different. The state has much more assets than it has liabilities, much more. Of course, there are some experts who are saying the state, all the assets of the state are 10 billion, 15 billion, 20 billion. And when you ask those experts, yes, but gold alone makes almost more than this amount. They tell you, yes, but there is a law that forbids to sell the gold, so we will not count the gold. Tell them, okay, but there are all those public utilities. They tell you, yes, but they are losing money, so they are worth nothing. You tell them, okay, but it has a lot of lands. They tell you, yes, but the lands, they are the property of the state and they do nothing with it, so it is worth nothing. So they have exactly the same reasoning as the one that happened in the Soviet Union when it collapsed, where they sold the assets of the state for nothing, and you had the billionaires, the Russian billionaires, were able to buy it for nothing because they considered that it was worth nothing. In fact, the state of Lebanon is extremely wealthy, extremely wealthy. It is not managing correctly, but it is extremely wealthy. Now, the most important for somebody who is illiquid is, does it have the intent to pay? If he does not have intent to pay, and we know as bankers, if somebody has no intent to pay, you can have a lot of collateral, it is not enough. It is the intention to pay which is essential. And I believe that the first step, if we want the recovery of Lebanon, is this intention to pay. The state has to say, I intend to pay everything, but not only the depositors, because there are a lot of victims, and the state has to take responsibility. We need to have a state that is responsible. that is respectful of the citizens, because after all, the state is not here to be served, it is here to serve. So it needs to pay all the victims of the port, the victims of the crisis. There are the pension owners who are not receiving their pension. Even the civil servants, we are happy that the state is paying almost peanuts for the civil servants when it is not correct. So it has to pay all the victims. Now, does it have the capacity to pay all that? We need to understand that the Lebanese economy, its natural size is not the 10 or 15 or 20 billion that the IMF or the Harvard report is saying. Nor is it 55 billion. In fact, it is 100 billion, because if we look back when it was 55 billion, we know that a lot of things, depending on the state, were poorly managed. So if it was properly managed, I'm sure that the economy would not run at 55 billion of GDP, but probably at 100 billion. So we have to calculate not based on 20 billion. Does it have the capacity to pay with 20 billion GDP? No, you should calculate based on a GDP of 100 billion. And if it is at 100 billion, certainly it has the capacity to pay. Now, of course, it depends how you manage those assets of the state. If you give them to, I don't know, you'll not have a good result. But if you give them to somebody like, we have examples of brilliant Lebanese managers, you take Carlos Sosa. Carlos Sosa, when he was given Nissan, well, Nissan was in the state of Lebanon, and it became a very profitable company. Or Apple. Apple, when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, it was almost bankrupt, and we know that it is one of the most profitable and most valuable company in the world. So it depends also how you manage all that. But for me, there is something that is more important than all that. I believe that the economy is a moral science. It means that it is built on values. Economy. It is not built on money. Money is not so important. It is what people perceive, what people are ready to do. This is the most important. And all those programs that are proposed are defeating the purpose, because they say we will take money from the people who have trusted the country, and then there will be other people later on. Well, it is built on unsolid foundation. You need to restore trust, and restoring trust means those who trusted you, you have to show them that their trust was well deserved. So it is extremely important. And there is also something else. It is the power of the diaspora. Lebanon is very powerful, more powerful than we think, because of the diaspora. All the people of Lebanese origin, we need to build on those people, all people of Lebanese origin, not only the people who have the Lebanese nationality. All those people give Lebanon a lot of power, and this power, if properly garnered, can make Lebanon go much further than the 100 billion I was mentioning in the beginning. It is an advantage that very, very few countries have in the world. So let us use the power of the diaspora. The Lebanese state should not sell its assets as it is proposed immediately, because those assets will be sold for peanuts. But it should manage them better. And then there is no reason that the Lebanese state manages so many different activities. But it has certainly the capacity to take responsibility for everything, not only the 20 billion or 30 billion or 50 billion, responsibility for everything for all the victims.
That's an interesting view on the capacity of the state, but the report itself increases the capacity of the state to pay its dues because it suggests what we all fear as depositors. And the report uses a word that has struck fear in the hearts of depositors for 3 years, which is the word haircut. And so basically the plan explicitly states that without a haircut, either on the Eurobond debt or on the newly issued certificates, which are given to depositors in place of their deposits, there is no solution for a sustainable plan. So my question goes to Nicolas. Is this really the only way out?
First of all, Najib, thank you, and Jean-Marc, thank you for organizing. Thanks to the Harvard Club for organizing this. It's a pleasure being with you today. I would like also to welcome lots of my friends here who came, who braved the rain and came, and Wadah, Marie-Claude, Tanaz, Shawa'il, Sanura, all my friends are here. Ahla wa sahla. Najib, you asked me a tough question. You know me for 3 years now, and you know what I fight for. I fight to bring back what has been stolen from the depositors, their money. There are many depositors here. Mr. Pharaon is one of the representatives of the depositor present with us. So does this plan help them? Is the country or the state rich? Yes, the state is extremely rich because it can create assets. Not only it has assets, it can create assets. It can create concessions. Like what has happened in Dubai with the PAL, they created assets from nothing. We might have oil. If we manage better our resources and our assets and our institutions, we can bring a lot of money to the budget that will be voted soon. If the state just arrange, the NEFA and the Ministry of Finance to collect money, just arrange this and collect that money, it will cover the budget deficit. I'm sorry to say that, but I will be very blunt. When I read first the plan, I was extremely happy to see that the plan is responsibilizing the states. But when I went further, I was extremely deceived that the plan at the end by doing a haircut on depositors. If we want to support the plan today, okay, whatever the plan, it has to have, one objective. It has to create trust. There is no economy without trust. My colleagues here knows there is no economy without trust. And trust comes by protecting the people who bring the money to the country, right? Origin of fund. Who brings the money to the country? All the depositors over the last 50 years who brought the money, because the balance of payment in Lebanon was always deficitary. And the only line in the balance of payment that was trying to cover this deficit was the money of the depositors from abroad, from Africa, America, Europe, Saudi Arabia, whatever. Even Lebanese themselves, they used to make growth in their own companies and put money in the system. This money was stolen. Okay, I'm gonna say it high and loud. Okay, this money needs to be restituted. Any plan that does not restitute, it's not easy, you have to discuss it, that does not restitute the depositor money, in a way or another, over time or not, is not building trust in the system. Why it's important to build trust? Because, when you have trust in the system, investors come and invest in the country. They create this 100 billion GDP growth that Mr. Obaji is talking about. Nobody will create. We cannot create. We managed to create 55. And we managed to do it because there was financial engineering, it was thriving, it was growing, it was artificial. Sorry to say that. Not only the assets were wrongly managed, but it was also artificial to reach the 55. I agree with Dr. Obaji. It should have been an economy of 100 billion, not 55. Now we are at 22 or 18, whatever the number. Okay, so when I look at the plan, so I'm going back to the plan, because we are discussing the plan, not the economy, discuss it at the end maybe view on the economy. When I come back to the plan, I compare it to the other plans that the government has done. At the end, there is a haircut. If I look at the plan of the government, I'm going to do a quick comparison. Okay, the plan of the government is saying, guys, the government owes money to the central bank. The central bank owes a big number of money to the banks. The banks owes money to their depositors. And because nobody has the money, the banks cannot pay the depositors. What was the proposal of the plan of the government is to cut the link between the central bank and the banks. Okay, page 9, clause 24.1 in the plan. Okay, I'm not inventing anything. By cutting the relation between the central bank and the bank will make a loss of $80 billion because the central bank will not pay back the banks. It's like the state doing default on the Eurobond. The central bank is doing default on the bank. If I'm wrong, let someone correct me. So by doing this, the banks will go bankrupt and depositor will lose their money. So there is a haircut at the top. In the plan of Harvard, it's trickier. What's happening is they are saying, today we have 90 billion of money in the banks for depositors. Okay? So we need to solve this problem because we know to bring back the money, the liquidity to the system. What they are saying, up to 150,000, they will pay the deposit. I don't know how, by the way. I'm not sure it will, because the plan doesn't confirm it's 100. It's estimation. And many times they use the word estimation. Okay? 150,000, which is $30 billion. I don't know how they're going to bring it. Anyway. But the big depositors, okay, they will give them certificate, as it was said, certificates. The state will exchange, they would do a swap between their deposit from the balance sheet of the banks against certificate guaranteed by the state. And what will happen? The balance sheet of the bank will feel better. The banks will survive. Okay, the central bank will not have any problem, will survive. The state will give you a paper like this one, an IOU paper, IOU money, like they give you paper for Eurobonds. And the debt will be between the state and the depositor. The bank will escape from any accountability. And this is, there are good banks and there are bad banks. Sorry to say that, okay? There are banks who, made the problem and played the wrong game with the financial. There are banks who was, where the result was on them was wrong. Okay, I'm not going to put names here. We have good banks with us. So and here what's happening? The state will own this certificate to the depositor. Okay, but there will be no accountability on the banks, no accountability on the central bank, no accountability on the state. Okay, there will be no lesson learned for not redoing the same mistake. Okay, we turn the page and we run again. There will be no restructuring in governance as a central bank and the monetary policy, which was the main problem of the economic crisis, and the risk that the bank took without thinking one time about the depositors. I'm sorry to say that. Maybe people will not be happy.
Nicola, there's a question here.
Let me finish. And what will happen at the end? What will happen at the end? Okay. Everybody is happy. The state will say, I take the debt with me. I take the Eurobond debt. I take the IMF debt. So 90 billion, 80 billion, let's say, plus 30 billion of Eurobond, 110 billion, plus 4 or 5 billion debt of IMF debt. Okay. And it was $115 billion. GDP is 20 billion. Debt over GDP is 600%, 700%, not sustainable. The report reached to a conclusion that what they are proposing is not sustainable. Hence, the state need to restructure this huge debt and do a haircut of 80%. So what are we doing? We are just joking and laughing on depositors and on creating trust in the system. Instead of haircutting on the top, they are haircutting at the bottom, and they are letting the people who made the mistake in the system getting out of it.
But
and this is a big problem for me. And I'm happy to ensure that they are.
Before you continue, there's a very important question. I think the audience should be asking themselves the same question. why did banks deposit their money at the central bank? I think, Dr. Riyad, maybe you can answer this
Maybe you
question.
can answer. This is important.
Yes, it's a very important question, and I think that you are not the only one who is asking. So, first of all, yes, you are laughing. You have to understand what is the central bank. In any country in the world, all the banks are subject to the local central bank, everywhere. This is how it is done. And why? Why is it so? Because everywhere in the world, they consider that the banking activity is almost a public service. So let us say you have put your money in a bank. Well, I'm not going to say in Lebanon. Consider that Lebanon is all wrong. Let us say you put your money. What is the best country in the world, in your opinion? What is the best country? Switzerland. If the Central Bank of Switzerland sends a letter, just a letter, without any control from anybody, a letter to the banks in Switzerland saying, in 1 month time, you'll put all your money with me. You think that the banks can refuse? They cannot refuse. This is simple letter, but they can do it also in another way. They can send another letter saying, obligatory reserves are now, like it was in Lebanon, 15%. You think that any bank can refuse? No. A central bank. Sorry.
They can refuse. You have no excuse.
No, they cannot
You have
refuse.
no excuse as banks. You can always come out of business.
No.
Yes, you can.
No,
If
you
you're a
can't.
central bank,
So,
close you down.
maybe we can have this discussion because it's very interesting. But let's have it after the panel question.
No, because we have the experience. We have the experience of obligatory reserves, and we have the experience of a letter, just a letter. We have the experience in Cyprus. We received a letter, and we're forced to comply. And the central bank can also, at any time, close a bank, a commercial bank. Why? They have discretionary power. So you have to understand that when you put money in any country in the world, you are, in practice, you are trusting the central bank of this country. Now, to come back to the banks. The banks put money in the central bank. Was it forbidden? It was not forbidden. So they could have done it. Nothing was against it. Was it contrary to their fiduciary duty? Because you might say, well, they are not doing something that is the interest of their client. It was not against their fiduciary duty because there was nothing that they could do differently. It was because central bank is both the lender of last resort and the borrower of last resort. And I remember, Najib, you said that that I have experience in other countries. Yes, in Europe, when the crisis of 2008 happened, we were extremely happy to put our money with the central bank. Why? Because it was the safest place to put our money. When in a crisis, you put your money, if it is possible, with the central bank. It is the safest place to put your money. Now, as I was saying, you don't have much choice, but in addition to that, it is the central bank who puts the guidelines. The guidelines mean that they indicate to you what they prefer you to do, and you cannot do differently. So when they put, I don't know, they put some ratios. They say you put your money with banks outside, we are going to put a risk weight of 20% or 40 or 50%. Well, means that you better put it in the country. So they put the ratios. They give their views. Why so many people listen to the Fed chairman? Why do they listen to it if it is not an indication of what is going to happen? So it is, they did not have much choice. Now, except for some people who had private information and knew that something would happen, it was very difficult to imagine that the central bank would default. You know any central bank in the history of the world that defaulted? None? You are a PhD? Did no one? So no central bank defaulted in the world, in the history of the world. So it was very difficult to imagine that, except if you had information. And therefore, I don't think that you can say that the banks were wrong in putting their money with the central bank, especially that if you look at the numbers of the central bank, okay, we are bankers, we look at the number. Are we more clever than the IMF or Ernst & Young or Deloitte, who were saying Deloitte or Ernst & Young give adverse opinion on the central bank?
No. No, they did not. They did not, and this is the problem.
Nicola and Dr. Riyad, I have listening to you both. My thought goes the liability of banks. So your position seems to indicate that they should not be held liable. Nicola seems to think that they should be held liable. The problem that we have discussing this report is that the report is silent on this issue.
Correct. Can I say a word about that?
Yeah. So just to put this into context. So first of all, for those of you who are a bit late, we have the QR code behind us where you can find the report. And in this report, there is no mention of legal liabilities or civil liabilities or criminal liabilities against anyone. So my question is, does this have to be addressed in any plan for the sustainability of the economy or for addressing the crisis? So my question is to both Dr. Riyad and Nicola.
Just finish. Yes. Everywhere in the world, when there is a crisis like this one, the first priority is to protect the depositors everywhere. It doesn't mean that the shareholders have to be protected. Now, when the Silicon Valley Bank defaulted, they protected the depositors. When there was the crisis of 2008, they protected the depositors. This is the first priority. Shareholders, okay, they take their responsibility, but the depositors, they did not have much choice. They were in this country, they were not in another country, and it is unusual that people have their money outside of their country. So I think that the first priority is not to save the shareholders, to save the banks and to save the depositors. And saving the banks is extremely important, not only because of the depositors, but because also of the information that banks have. And Bernanke, who has had a Nobel Prize 2 years ago, I think, or 1 year ago, had it because he showed very clearly in his studies that the crisis of 1929 was so severe because the information that was present in the bank disappeared. And the different plans, including this one, when they are saying a few banks will disappear, are going contrary to the rationale of economics. Economics say banks should not disappear. Maybe shareholders can lose their money, but the banks should not disappear. Sorry.
Okay, it's my turn. 2
Yes.
minutes. Okay. First, I would very much agree with what Riyad said at the end. That means banks should not disappear. Shareholders might lose their money the way it happens, because the economy, in order to get growth, to have growth, need the banking sector. It's very important. We all know that we had $7-8 billion of money that came during the summer, but we didn't see this growth of the 7 billion because there was no banking sector to absorb the 7 billion and create loans for the growth. This money came in, then came out by the the importers to import, goods, stocks and things instead of putting them in the bank. So this money that came disappeared. So banking sector are very important. We should not destroy the banking sector because we are not in a socialist nor a communist country. We are in a free country where the free economy is important. However, there were mistakes that were done, but most of the banking sector, I'm not saying all, saying most. He was a victim, but a victim with his depositors as well. So that he has a problem. Okay, so why I'm saying that? The first part of what Riyad said about the central bank being the last, so I'm a banker as well, for 30 years. He's more seasoned than me. However, okay, I do believe personally that banks can use the central bank as a last resort. Definitely. This is the role of the central bank, being last resort, governance of the banking sector, and monetary policy maybe. However, you cannot put your money at the last resort in the currency that is different from the country currency. And this is the main mistake that the bank has done. They can put it in lira as much as they want. They can put all the depositors in lira because the central bank has a printing machine of lira. They can print, devaluate, pay back. They put it in dollar. And they did what we call a single borrower exposure that is governed by high-level Basel III and IV rules, which when a bank as a standard cannot put more than 20% to 30% of its capital at a single place if it's not its own currency. So this is a fundamental problem that took place. Also, the bank did what we call a maturity mismatch, which means, okay, they took from the deposit at 1 year and they placed it at the central bank at 10 years. Why? Because the financial engineering, in order to give high interest, I'm not going into the details of how it worked, they obliged the bank to put 10 years, 8 to 10 years deposit. CDs, whatever you will call it, I'm not going into this tiny details. So when the banks came to say, give me back my money, the central bank told them, guys, you put it at 10 years. That's why the governor of the central bank came on TV a year and a half ago and said, I will give you 20%. If you want to come and take it now, because the maturity was not there. So, and when we talk about interest, cutting the interest of the depositor, the high interest that they took, okay, yes and no. Yes, if it was 3 years ago, but now for 3 years, they are not paid interest. So if you do the average, they are not earning anything. And if you want to cut the interest, the bank took high interest as well, because as per the Alvarez report, the central bank was giving 22.5% of interest. 7.5 was for the banks and the rest for depositors. So we have to cut interest from everyone. Okay, so yes, there are responsibilities across the value chain, from the state to the central bank to the banks. Not all the banks, I agree, not all the banks, but most of the banks. Okay, and so if you ask me personally, what is the responsibility chain in order to make a plan to save the country? Everyone has to participate, right? The state is the most, the biggest problem. And for me, it's between 40 and 60% responsibility of the state for what happened, because it's spent with budget with deficit. So we have to watch out the deficit of the budget for 15 years, 20 years, with the balance of payment deficit since 2011, the beginning of the Syrian crisis. And when you have a budget deficit and the balance of payment deficit, there are Harvard students behind, I think, okay, 101 economy, it's called twin deficit. A twin deficit will lead definitely to an economic crisis. Okay, so the state is on average 50% responsible, central bank 25, 30, and banks between 20 and 25. There is a responsibility in the chain, and in order to build back the economy and pay back the depositors, each one needs to put his hand in his pocket and pay back. And until now, there is no plan beside mine. Okay, that put that describe the responsibility and make everyone paying at his level. And yes, banks had the choice. Sorry, they could have said no. There was no obligation. There was incentive but no obligation. You took more money at the banking sector, not at your bank. More money than needed in your banking. The economy has 55 billion in GDP. How can you deploy $150 billion deposit in 55 billion in GDP? It's impossible. So your only resort was to go to the central bank because we didn't have a capital market to deploy. Okay, so that's the main problem. And the central bank gave incentive, huge incentive, unacceptable incentive. That's why I'm talking about governance. If you want to solve the problem, we have to restructure the central bank first and the banks. Maybe shareholders will pay the price, but not the banking sector. We have to keep the banking sector in order to regrow the economy and relaunch it. But we have to build the trust. To build the trust, you have to protect depositors because they are the origin of fund. When they have origin of fund, Kidon or Don. Origin of fund, you protect the origin of fund. And that's why you create trust in the system. And we can create trust in the system, people will come and invest. When they invest, they will recruit. People, companies, when they recruit, people will have money because they have salaries. When they have salaries, they spend. When they spend, the economy will run. That's how it works. Shanek, in France, in the US, unemployment. It's very important to have employment growth in a country because it runs the economy. And when it runs the economy, it improved the purchase power. The Lebanese purchase power was destroyed by 100% roughly. Every government need to be judged on the purchase power he produces.
It's a good point on the purchase power. So
I promise to respect. I promise to respect.
So just to wrap up very quickly on the report, and then we'll open up the floor for Q&A. There is two more issues that need to be discussed. The first one is a big part of the plan, and which relates to what you were saying. The banks were putting their money in a foreign currency, and then this destroyed the purchase power. So one of the key elements of the plan is the full dollarization of the economy. So I would like to hear the thoughts of Dr. Riyad on this issue, and then Dr. Habib.
Okay. I hate to contradict Nicolas, especially after he said so many good things about me. But we'll discuss it later on. Now, full dollarization, I think is impossible to do in Lebanon because Lebanese are so much attached to the Lebanese pound that it is very difficult. But personally, I believe in dollarization, not necessarily dollars, maybe euro. I believe in dollarization, but it can be done in a very soft way without affecting the Lebanese psyche. And it's very simple. It is enough to say that foreign currency, all of them, have legal tender in Lebanon. So it depends on the contract that you have. This is number one. And two, and most importantly, that the Lebanese government cannot borrow in Lebanese pound because all our problems are coming from that. All of that. There is something that very few people are aware of, but the fact that the Lebanese government borrowed in Lebanese pound allowed a gigantic insider trading because somebody who in, let us say, 30 years ago, had changed his dollars into Lebanese pound and bought treasury bonds, Lebanese treasury bonds, knowing that the Lebanese pound would not be devalued, multiplied his dollar by 30. And these 29 are all in the debt of the government, of the state of Lebanon, in a gigantic insider trading. Now, if they are not allowed to borrow in Lebanese pound, they are forced to have discipline in their budget, which is very good. Number two, it will free the gold, which is theoretically there. We have almost $20 billion of gold. It is theoretically there to protect the Lebanese pound, as you can see easily. It has protected the Lebanese pound. But then if you don't have Lebanese pound to protect, then You can liberate 15, $18 billion. And those $18 billion are going to be much more than what the IMF can give. And also it gives, because the most important is stability. If there is stability, it allows people to do their business more easily. So stability is essential, and a partial dollarization is would be a very feasible study. Just one point. Contrary to what most people think, but I invite you to read my dissertation, my thesis, where I proved that you can have a monetary policy in a foreign currency. Yes. So if you read my dissertation, you'll find out that, yes, it is possible. Yes, it was done elsewhere without people conscious of that, but it is possible to have a monetary policy in a foreign currency.
So a lot has been said now, but we want to look at the future, what we do. The analysis of what has happened in the past is useful, but I think that a lot of you have heard it on TVs and everywhere. The question is where this country should go, what kind of economic policy, what should we do to get it out of this mess? In the report here, what is missing, in my opinion, is that without proper governance and without real reform, all these things proposed and all we're talking about will lead us nowhere. If we have a political class which is the same as it was the last 15 years, they will let nothing happen. I mean, this report gives you steps of what to do, and I basically don't endorse most of them, but it's a good start. However, the question is, you should have recommended reform of the Justice Department, number one. Without justice, neither will get foreign direct investment, neither the Lebanese will get their money back, nor there will be trust in the government. That's number one. Number two, there has to be laws done. Laws about corruption and implemented. There has to be laws about capital controls when the time is. This has to come. And accountability laws also have to come. If there is no accountability, we will not get back the trust and the confidence. And this is very difficult in Lebanon for the time being. So we have to fight on this front in terms of knowing what the country needs. I think many people have already an idea of what the country needs, but this would be first before this program. This program afterwards tells you the first thing you do is you put capital controls. The second thing you do after capital controls is you try to restructure the banks, but at the same time, you dollarize all the economy. Well, I'm back to saying if we want to dollarize the whole economy, then we have to take about 1 billion as the report says, to pay back to buy the liras. Where did this 1 billion come? The fate of this 1 billion will be like the SDRs. Instead of 1 billion they will spend 2 billion. From where? From your money in the banks, at the central bank, the reserves. So number one, to make dollarization, you need to use depositors' money. Number two is when you want to dollarize, basically you want to be sure that you have enough dollars in the market to be able to meet your demands. Before the crisis, we had $6.5 billion a year in salaries and retirement. And this, after 5 years or 6 years now, we're going to go back to this number. If we don't reform the administration, as I said before, start with cutting down employees and doing real IT and making the client very far from the execution so there is no bribes. If we don't do this, then we are in serious trouble because you have to produce 6.5 billion, plus you have to start to pay interest on the debt. This program tells you that the government debt will go down to from 120 billion to 18 billion after the haircuts, the certificates, everything. We start at 18. Then it tells you we're going to add 8 billion to be able to run this economy, to start it. So the total government loan will be 26 billion. This will have interest rate payments. Now in the world, it's 6%, 5%. So you need to ensure also the interest on the ongoing. Then you need to ensure payments for the electricity company if there is a deficit. And the investments and everything. You have to ensure there are dollars. They are taking the example of Ecuador. Ecuador is not Lebanon, unfortunately. Ecuador has resources, it has oil, it has many minerals, it has fish exports, it has everything. So the situation here, ideally, to have dollarization is perfect. But right now, what I would recommend, to be able not to lose this flexibility you have with the Lebanese pound. If you have a crisis and you have all dollarized, you are in deep trouble. You are in a recession. And you need to do it progressively over years to be able to ensure you're not going to have a big recession due to the lack of dollars in the market. Because how did we survive in the last 4 years? We survived by paying all our expenses at Lebanese pounds on a devaluated level so the government could pay them. If this was not the case, if the government had to pay all dollars for the last 4 years, you would not have had the dollars to pay them. Therefore, we have to move, in my opinion, progressively to a currency board situation. Currency board means full discipline in the central bank. After all the reforms that have to be done in the central bank, so that we don't repeat the same thing, that the central bank doesn't go to bed with the bankers, that the central bank doesn't hide $43 billion in losses that nobody knows about, even the banker, that the central bank is looking for a lot of transparency rather than what's happening. In this case, you go to a currency board and you start testing, you go towards dollarization, you start to tell people, pay your taxes in dollars, and you see if they can pay them in dollars. If they pay them in dollars progressively, the currency board will function. Few years later, you could dollarize, which is ideal because it brings some confidence for the foreign investors and will be best of all worlds. You don't need much of the central bank anymore. And you give confidence to people who want to invest in Lebanon and bring foreign direct investment. So, shall I conclude, or you want to conclude? What do you like?
I want to wrap up because I think the audience has a lot of questions, and I think everyone will have the final say while answering the question. So I think it's better for us to open the proper questions. But I have a question reserved for George. So if someone can give him the microphone. But I think you got a kind of semi-answer from Nicolas, right? Before you start, so this is general guidelines 101 for Q&A. Q&A, so questions from the audience, answers from the panel, not a monologue or speech, please. Okay, so let's keep it to short questions so that we can wrap up.
This report is written by a bunch of academicians, and it's worth as much as any all good academic exercise is worth. Anywhere in the world, Harvard included. It doesn't distribute responsibility. Without distributing liability, it's absolutely worthless. Liability is up and down the chain, but the professor forgot depositors. When you make a deposit, you make a business decision. The business decision has its risk and its reward, right? Some banks give you very high interest rates and then go. So you have to pay for that. So I don't have too many questions. The country is without doubt very rich. It can afford, once its government once its political system is reformed, and then the proper government is in place, a government with ministers such as the one sitting near me here. I think we could very quickly sort the whole problem out. By the way, the report, I am sure, does not address the fact that not all depositors are the same. One depositor who has $250 million with one of the big banks opened his account here because all the other banks in Switzerland closed it. You want to treat this guy the same way as you treat some professor who has worked all his life and earned a retirement sum in the bank, and now he can't use it. So they are very different animals.
So I have to interrupt because we need to really wrap up. So only the floor for questions.
Questions?
Do you hear me? Okay. I would like to, I had a lot of things to say, but I will not say them because Najib said only a question. So I'm going to ask only one single question. Is there any official audit or any respected audit saying that the Central Bank of Lebanon financed the state with all of the depositors' money, with the 80 billion. Is there an official audit saying in figures that the Central Bank of Lebanon has financed the state with all of the depositors' money, meaning the $80 billion? Does that statement exist anywhere? And if it exists, please tell me where, because I would
Can
like
I answer this
to read
question?
it.
Can I answer this
First
question?
question, I have a second question, only one. I'm asking this question because you cannot suggest any solution, whether the Harvard report or any other report or study or government plan, if you don't say the truth about the root causes. And what is more criminal than making a crime is concealing the root causes for the crime. So this is why I'm asking this question, because the report is basing all of the suggestions on this statement, and I don't see that this statement is accurate. Now, going from, I don't know what Gaspar said to what you say, I think there's a whole range of possibilities, but where is that statement? Thank you.
I will answer the first question. Maybe my colleague can answer the second one. Okay. To be frank with you, Michael, one of the big responsibility in Lebanon rely on auditors. I think it's the biggest. And if we sue auditors, like they did in the UK or South Africa, you can bring back to Lebanon maybe $50 billion. Otherwise, they will close, like what happened with Enron. Okay? So auditors, over the last 15 years, there were 3 auditors, ما رح نسميهم, because they are not here to point fingers, but everybody, there were 3 auditors. They were having 80% of the banking sector and the central bank at the same time, which is the conflict of interest. I'm sorry to say that. None of them, okay, has ever highlighted a risk of putting depositors in the central bank. Okay, so banks, to their case, they said, okay, I can do it. No, خليني نكفي. None of them said the central bank has a loss, while the central bank has a loss for the last 10 years. Is there an audit report saying that the central bank financed the states? No, because the central bank was never audited the way it should be. Even the gold was never counted, which is an aberration. $17 billion of your balance sheet never counted. It was counted, let's say, over a year back. To your question, did the central bank finance the state? Yes, I'm going to tell you how. I'm going to count in front of you to see how much the state owed to the central bank, because the central bank owes money to the banks and the banks to the depositors. The central bank lended to the state based on budget that has been voted over the last 10 years, 15 years, $24 billion for the electricity.
No.
24, 25, 50?
I'm sorry, I can't. The central bank did not lend without.
No, to the electricity of Lebanon.
Marikot's question is rhetorical. The answer is the central bank never lent the government money in dollars. Never happened.
Maybe in dollars. No. 1 second. He is right. Equivalent dollar at 1005. Equivalent dollar at 1005. 24 billion plus interest بيطلعوا شي 40 billion.
بالليره
ايه بالليره معك حق على 1005. بس ده خليني كفي بس عم تسالني قديش في عم بقول لك ليره دولار.
اسالك سؤال ريتوريكال.
اوكي ريتوريكال. خليني كفي لا في 16 مليار دولار كمان بالبالانس شيت تبع البنك المركزي. هيدي مش زيرو. اوكي هلا كمان في الدوله في السنترال بانك ما عملت lending. She didn't give money as a lend to the state. They bought Eurobonds, $5.2 billion and 60 billion of treasury bills. This is financing the state and overcoming the I'm كفيني. Donc في عندك أنا for me there is 24 billion Lebanese pound equivalent dollar for the electricity of Lebanon that the state need to reimburse. There is 16.5 billion in the balance sheet of the central bank that we all see. That is 5.2 billion of euro bonds. It's not a loan, it's a finance, which is at the end, it's money for the states. Okay, but the central bank governor is very clever. Huh? He didn't make it as a loan. He bought papers. Okay, but he's not. And there's 60 billion of treasury bills. Zidion, 60 plus 40 ADL is 100 billion, plus 5.2 euro bonds, 105, plus 16.5, $120 billion on average, plus equivalent lira. ما بدك audit.
So
مليار دولار. لا فلوسهم equivalent lira. Hey, SWAS either through financing, it is in the audit because the central bank has bought treasury bills 16 billion and bought 5 billion of euro bonds, right?
Nicola, maybe we can.
It is.
Move on. There is
a liability
Nicola,
between the state and the central bank.
Nicola, maybe we can move on to another question. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, Osman. Merry Christmas. Antoine Ganan, founder and CEO of HUC. I have a question. What can we learn from the Argentinian case study, the election of Javier Milei and the dollarization and the recent crunch that happened? Any predictions there, and can we apply any lessons here in Beirut? Thank you.
Who wants to answer this question?
I don't have much information about Argentina, but what I know is that the IMF plans, there were so many in Argentina and none really succeeded. So this is what we can learn now. Dollarization of the economy of Argentina, I don't think it was dollarized until recently. So can we learn something out of it? I think that it comes back to the question of the dollarization. Is it good or bad to do dollarization? I think that if you do it in a soft way, it is good. If you continue having an autonomy in your monetary policy, it's good. It allows you to be disciplined in your budget, it's good. The most important is to have stability, because the role of a state, the most important role of the state is to give moral comfort. And in Lebanon, unfortunately, the state is giving moral hazard. So if you are in Lebanon, you want to do anything in Lebanon, you don't know whether you are going to lose your deposits or to lose your maybe to be nationalized or not to be able to go to the courts because they are all closed, to register your property because it's closed. So moral hazard, and the role of the state is to give moral comfort.
I think we're going to take two more questions from the audience and one more question from our online audience. I think the microphone is already with someone. Yes, can you please ask your question?
Oh, thank you for this. The fact that we're actually having this discussion is definitely a step forward in trying to solve this. A question to Riyadh, first of all. I know, but today the central bank, as bankers, all the central bank, every time we actually had an FX gap in our balance sheet, we were penalized all the time. In reality, the central bank was running the largest FX gap by lending the government in Lebanese pound, okay, by taking the deposits from banks in dollars. This is the first of all. Why was this never flagged? And the problem is that the central bank was never audited to actually flag this. This is the first question. The second question I wanted to actually goes back to the dollarization. We need to be clear that although the report says dollarization is a step forward to actually create stability, we need to put a very strong caveat here, is that if we are to embrace dollarization, we need to also embrace the loss of sovereignty. And we have to agree. And this is a question we as a country need to address.
Well, we discussed it a little bit earlier. I told you, but I'll offer you my dissertation, and you'll see that you don't need to lose your sovereignty if you do dollarization. But I would like to answer first about the question of the rules that apply to everybody except to the central bank. The central bank was acting like a bad mother. What does a bad mother say? It gives contradictory messages to the child, and this brings psychotic children. So our central bank, they were giving us contradictory messages. They were saying, yes, do like that, I will do the contrary, but do like this. And so it's not good.
We have time for one more question from the audience. Najib?
It's not a question, actually. If I can just give, I don't want to call it advice because I'm not as experienced as you, but from my position, I just want to say that the last 4 years, I attended maybe hundreds or thousands of hours of the same institution. And here we have a report from Harvard starting by a capital control. Let's ask ourselves why we don't still have a capital control, which we had it in Cyprus and other countries in 48 hours. And what is really the problem? The problem is not what is the solution, because you guys and a lot of Lebanese companies outside, experts, consultants, can come and have the perfect solution in 1 month. It's how to implement the solution. And with the people in power, with the decision makers, we cannot do it. We can't have a solution. Let's focus on the real problem. Why we are facing that now in the budget? After 4 years, we have this budget to face. So really, let's not waste our time with doing reports. I appreciate what you are doing and others what they are doing. We can do that. Let's focus on eliminating the people in control, and this is the only solution.
So just to bounce back on this, yeah, but before we move on, just to bounce back, this Nicola, just to bounce back on this, to be clear, we did not draft this report. هذا مش احنا عاملينه. ايه بعدين ليش ما في كابيتال كنترول؟ انا اجاوبك. انا ما في خطه. شو بدك تعمل كابيتال كنترول بلا خطه؟ شو بدك تعمل؟ كابيتال كنترول باردون بس معلش بس عم تقول لي ليه ما في كابيتال كنترول؟ ايه ليش؟ لانه ما عندنا خطه للكابيتال. بيسلفوا لك مصرياتك. ايه كنا عندنا 27 اليوم لحالنا صرفونا مصرياتك. طيب بس في بس اوضح شغله just to be clear. In the report, the capital control is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. يعني capital control محكوم. لا يقدروا ينفذوا الخطة.
I'm saying there's no decision. You didn't get me. I'm sorry. Maybe I explained in the wrong way. I just gave an example of the capital control. It's the first thing you do in any state in this crisis, and they didn't do it. You're missing the decision. It's just missing the decision. People in power are not allowing anyone to have a plan. We're not allowed to have a plan. We're not allowed to have a decision. You need $3 billion to have electricity. You're not allowed to have electricity. You're spending $5 to $6 billion in the black market for fuel, for generators. You're spending $400 million for medicines. You're spending around $12 billion in the black market and the illegal economy, and they are doing zero about it. So it's only the decision this is where we should fight. We should go to the war to be able to win. The war is there, and we are fighting here. We should go and fight there. This is what I'm saying.
So thank you for this clarification. So we have time for one last question.
أنا مش question comment. طيب هيدا
واحد بالدور.
عمي خلوه يحكي. اوكي انا عندي كومنت رح اسمح لحالي اعمل كومنت لانه on page 4 of the report بالاكنولجمنت سكشن في 4 اشخاص mentioned، واحد منهم هو انا. وقت طلع الريبورت بصراحه تعجبت شوي منه. بالاكزيكتيف سامري يا ريته مقل معالي سعاده النايب. وينه سعاده النايب؟ سعاده النايب لحظه بدي سو بالريبورت في الريبورت انا بالاكنولجمنتس تبعه تعجبت بالصيغه اللي اجت، لانه بالاكزيكتيف سامري بالريبورت بيحكي شغله سيميلر للي حكيتوها انتم، اللي هو عملوا اسامبشن انه هيدا هو لايبيليتي للدوله اللبنانيه. الدين بلبنان مقسوم انتو تو بارتس. عندك قبل الازمه 90 مليار دولار دين الدوله اللبنانيه، يورو بونز وسي ديز بالليره، 30 مليار دولار بالدولار و60 مليار بالليره، و110 مليار دولار هو تبع رياض الهندسات الماليه. هلا وقت عملوا هن بالريبورت لامبينج اوف بوث اوف ذم، المشكله هون وانت رح تفهم علي شو عم بحكي هون. ال 60 مليار دولار دين الدوله اللبنانيه مرق بالاكزيكتيف برانش مجلس الوزراء ورئيس الجمهوريه، ومرق عندكم انتم الليجسليتيف برانش. معناتها الشعب اللبناني التاكس بير اللبناني كان معه خبر بهذا البارت من الدات. بينما ال 110 مليار دولار هندسات ماليه اللي عملوا رياض هودي اوف بالانس شيت، ما كان حدا عارف فيهم، لا الاكزيكتيف برانش لا الليجسليتيف برانش ولا الفورث ستيت يعني الميديا، كان تحت الطاوله. So you have to separate الدت اللي يعني اللي صوت لك عنده liability بالدت اللي اخده انت باسمه، بس ما عنده liability اللي صوت لك على الدت اللي كان عامله رياض. الشغله الثانيه المهمه عم نحكي legislative branch. لا ايه بس اللي عم نقوله انه مش مسؤول التاكس بير اللبناني. الشغله الثانيه انه
Sorry, the central bank belongs to whom?
خليني كمان doesn't matter it was under the table.
If the government
معلش let me finish my point. I didn't interrupt you. Let me finish. الشيء الثاني هي انه الدوله اللبنانيه تدينت بالدولار 30 مليار 31 مليار دولار يورو بوند بلس 1.2 بليون دولار a year على 20 سنه من الام تي سي وتاتش، يعني مولت الكهرباء بحالها 1.2 بليون ضرب 20 سنه بلس 30 مليار. يعني رياض ما دينا بالدولار، وهو بيقولها بالانترفيوز تبعه، وانا دينتهم بالليره اللبنانيه اللي هي عمله قربت بعض. سو في هون سيبريشن. المصريات اللي راحوا البنوك دينوها للسنترال بانك راحت على دعم سعر الصرف موست اوف 70% اللي هو الكونسامشن، والباقي راح فانسي انترست، يعني اللي فاتوا ظهر قبل ما اجت الازمه او ظهر
Can I ask you to wrap up very quickly?
That's all I have to say. one more thing هجاوبك على مين مول.
لا بليز ما تجاوب.
بدك تعرف مين مول الريبورت؟ اسمه جراي شغله، بتروح على الريبورت اعمل له ويب سايت، اعمل له جوجل سيرش، بتشوف 4 5 واحد منهم مسيو ابنه لمسيو مياطي.
We have to wrap up. Thank you everyone for coming. You can ask your questions to the panelists afterwards, so that they'll still be here. Thank you everyone for coming, and we hope to see you again for other events. Thank you.
We have some online questions.
Online questions,
Il a beaucoup tardé, il a énormément tardé. Comment? Non, je l'ai pas tardé. Mais je pense que c'est la. Ah, il mettait quand tu peux. Regarde, c'est.